clean. Get Coach's Corner.
You're listening to the Rugby Coaches Corner podcast with your host, Andy Plimer.
For someone to explain.
Bringing you up-to-date coaching concepts from the world of rugby.
The distinction between these mandatory.
Sharing ideas to make the game better.
Hi there, everyone. Thanks for joining me again on the Rugby Coaches Corner podcast. We're just about to get into my chat with Kieran Crowley, the head coach of Benetton Treviso Rugby. Just a bit of a heads up for this interview. We had quite a few blips in the interview from bad internet coverage, so some of the editing doesn't sound as smooth as what I would have hoped for. So some of the transitions, if you hear anything weird, it's we lost a bit of content due to poor internet connection. But other than that, I think you're going to get a lot out of the chat. Great guy. Really appreciated him coming on the show, and look forward to hearing people's feedback on the episode. All right, cheers. Bye for now. All right, welcome to episode number 28 of the Rugby Coaches Corner podcast. I'm your host, Andy Plimer, and joining me today is Kieran Crowley. Kieran was born and raised in Taranaki, New Zealand, where he played 200 first-class games for that province. He was an All Black between 1983 and 1991 and lifted the very first Webb Ellis Cup in 1987. He has coached professionally since 98, which involved 9 years with Taranaki, including 2 years with the New Zealand under-20s, and then an 8-year stint with the Canadian men's side before relocating to Treviso in Italy to take on the head coaching role at Benetton Rugby. It's a pleasure to have you on the show, Kieran, so welcome.
Yeah, thanks very much, Andy. Pleased to be here.
Yeah, awesome. So a bit of your backstory there, but go into a bit more detail about your playing and coaching. I think you played a bit in Europe as well.
Yeah, I had a couple of years when I was in the early 20s in Italy playing club rugby, before it went professional and that, which was a great sort of life experience. A lot of New Zealanders go travelling when they're younger, and rugby seems to be a vehicle where you can, get your foot in anywhere. So had a good time during that, and was lucky enough back in New Zealand to sort of get selected for a few teams. And New Zealand rugby's a way of life, really. So it's a bit like ice hockey, I suppose, in Canada or that sort of thing. So it's it's pretty high profile there, and I was lucky enough to make a few teams, and have had a great life with rugby, I suppose.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, and sadly, Aussie rules is the high-profile sport in Australia, but I won't speak about that.
Fair enough.
So your time in Canada, you spent 8 years in Canada, and we had a bit to do with each other over that time. What were some of your highlights of your time in Canada? There must have been a few.
Oh yeah, I mean, we really loved our time in Canada. I mean, we've still got a house there, and the two of the kids are going to university there, so we still call Canada our home at the moment. And the people we met were outstanding. There's some great people in rugby there that work hard for the sport, and that politically sometimes, it's like anywhere, it's a little bit challenging. But, as far as, the people and that, we really loved it. And, I mean, the country's a great place. I mean, just the landscape and the places to visit, etc., are really good. From a rugby perspective, I think, rugby in Canada is not a mainstream sport. Certainly getting a lot more profile now with the Olympics, etc. But when I first got there, I was a little bit surprised, really, I suppose, of the pathways, etc., that didn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
And, it was almost as if, Rugby Canada was in one corner, each provincial union was in another, each national team was in another. There was no sort of group working together, I suppose. So yeah, I think the establishment of the CRC was a massive thing because competitions to be able to be, or players to be able to be in one place for selection, etc. But it also allowed areas to sort of build a pathway, I suppose, for players in those areas. So for me, that was one of the highlights.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, I've been here for about the same time as you were here. And I think from a national team point of view, I thought the 2011 World Cup side, just the run they had there, and they had some great results, and that team looked super tight and a really good group of guys. Was that? I suppose you don't want to make highlight favourites or anything like that, but that would have been a good experience, especially being back in New Zealand as well for that World Cup.
Oh yeah, no, that was great. Obviously I knew the system back there, and I think the guys had a pretty good time. And one thing that really I was pleased with was the way we evolved our game over the years too. I thought we became more of an all-rounded team, and that was how we played in 2011. It was how we played in 2015, but 2015 we just didn't get the results. Those sorts of things are good things. That I'll remember fondly.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so you've only just recently left Canada, so you can probably provide a bit of insight on what do you think after your tenure and moving on. What do you think are some of the challenges that face Canadian rugby now?
Oh, I think the challenges, a lot of them haven't changed. You've got things like the scope of the country and the distance and that, but that's you can't keep given that as an excuse because it's a factor that's never going to go away. I mean, for me, we've missed the boat a little bit back in 2000, and I remember the first tour I went on in 2008. We needed to get a centralised training group. I felt at that stage, it never came about because of various things. We were able to get onto we had some players playing in North Wales, etc., which they got that experience there, and that sort of pushed us through to the 2011 World Cup. And then, we never got a group together in Canada that were training and we were developing them. We never had an academy system, a national academy system, all those sorts of things. So that was to me a massive thing, and it, it's started now, but for me, it's missed the boat. I mean, to me now, it's it's going to take a number of years now to recover lost ground because you've missed a whole group of players that needed to be developed who are not developed as they should have. It's not just about your top 15 players beneath that need that development. So that's a challenge. I think politically in Canada, there's still I think West Coast has a massive problem out there. They're still not on board with national programs. The thing that is massive in a place like New Zealand, for example, it's the role of the provinces or the role of the club coaches, etc., to get the players best opportunity to represent their province. And then, it's the role of those coaches and those organisations to give the players the best chance to represent the country sort of thing. But in Canada, to me, there's a lot of politics and clubs, etc., that, they don't do what's best for the country. They do what's best for the club. And until they start to understand that, we're all working for the same thing and we're all working in the same direction, until that understanding becomes commonplace, you're always going to have challenges, and that, there's too many people for me from on the outside trying to pull things down rather than build things.
Yeah, no, it's going to be interesting times for sure in the next few years. Okay, so you've moved on to Treviso to be the head coach of Benetton. For those who don't know, Northern Italy rugby culture and the environment, what's it like up there, and what have your initial experiences been like?
Yeah, it's Treviso is a place that's about 25 minutes from Venice. It's a lovely place in northern Italy. It's pretty good weather at the moment. It's 30-odd degrees, and we're about 2 hours away from the mountains as well. Treviso is a traditional club in Italy that's had a lot of success in the Italian competition. And then 5 or 6 years ago, I think it was, they got Italy had 2 teams admitted to the Celtic League, which Celtic League is the best 4 teams in Wales and Ireland, and then 2 teams from Scotland and 2 teams from Italy. So they got taken into that, and they've had a hard challenge the last couple of years. They've finished down bottom with the other Italian team, and that's a factor, I think, of probably the professionalism, etc., that they were just a little bit behind, but they're certainly working hard to put in place now. And so I've come into an environment here where we have 42 contracted players. We start pre-season in July or beginning of July, and then we go right through our first games this week, and then we go right through until May playing competition just about every week. I think we have about 2 or 3 weeks off during the whole season, but so we go right through. We play 22 games in a Celtic League competition, and then we also play in the European Championship or the Challenge Cup, which we have another 6 games in that. So it's a massive difference, I suppose, for me that I'm together with a team for that amount of time. We train, we depending on turnaround between games, but you're training 5 or 6 times a week. So it's a fully professional environment, just exactly like your top clubs and anywhere else in the world. So it's great, really enjoying it. Be some challenges, but I've had some challenges with the language, obviously, but it's Italian, but a lot of it's English and that. So we're getting by there, and we'll see how things go.
Yeah, Aussies and Kiwis aren't renowned as being the most bilingual of people.
No, we're not. I mean, Europeans, they have to speak another language, so it's either French or English. So we're getting by, but if you make an effort, I think one of the things when I got the role here, they still wanted to keep the Italian flavour. So I'm learning Italian slowly. So we'll see how that
goes.
Great,
awesome, cool. So that's obviously one challenge. What about you kind of came in halfway through the season last year, I believe, and that would have been pretty challenging as well. How'd you approach that?
Oh yeah, I only come in for a couple of games. I mean, I didn't coach whatever. I just come over to have a look how they did things, etc. And that was really beneficial because it gave me an insight for when I came in now. So I believe there's 3 things in rugby from a coach's perspective. You got to get your culture right. That's the things that inside the team and outside the team. So you got to get that side right. You got to get the leadership right, and then obviously you got to get your game right. And so we've done a lot of work on culture, and we're working on that, keeping working on that. We're keeping working on the leadership side of things. I've found here it's a little bit like Canada in a way that players are expecting to be told what to do rather for them to take a bit of ownership themselves, and that's not only on the field but also off the field. So that's an ongoing process. And then the other one is way you play the game. They were very forward orientated here, very straight up. So we're looking at trying to change the style of play a little bit. Obviously still play to our strengths, but we need to give the ball a little bit more air, I think. And so we're working on those 3 things, and we won't have instant results or anything like that, I don't think. But by the end of the year, I hope that we've seen a little bit of improvement in them.
From that time that you spent towards the end of last season, what were some of the observations that you thought, okay, we've got to change a few things for this season that's about to kick off today?
Well, I think we've got to have a more positive approach to our games. I thought we tried a lot. Well, the games I saw anyway, and then I started watching them as well. Once I got the role here, was they needed to try and win games rather than try not to lose games or try to keep scores down. I think there's a big difference in the way you approach a game, and I think that is one of the things that we needed to really work on. So, hopefully, we've talked all about that, but until you get in the heat of the fire, you don't know.
Yeah.
Whether it's changed.
Yeah, for sure. And that must have been pretty big news too, the signing of Conor O'Shea for the head coach. What dealings have you had with him so far?
Yeah, that's big news for them, I think. He's been in a couple of times already, him and Mike Katz here as well. And they base themselves halfway between Treviso and Zebre as the other Italian team in the competition. So they're halfway between both of us. And they come in each week just have a look and observe and talk to players, etc. So that's going to be massive for Italian rugby. There hasn't been a lot of it's a little bit like Canada. I think there hasn't been a lot of alignment between national union and provincial unions, or national union and Zebre and national union and Treviso. And I think that's one of the main roles that Connor's got to do, is to get the pathways channel of information, etc., all that, right? So I think that's going to be a massive thing.
Yeah, and I think it will be exciting to see how it progresses in the next couple of years. All right. So pre-season, you're just about to kick off the season. Actually, as we speak, your first game's against Leinster coming up. What have been some of the goals that you and the team have set for Pro 12 and the Challenge Cup this year?
Yeah, we haven't even talked about the Challenge Cup yet. We'll talk about that. We don't play that until I think it's about 8 weeks in or something like that. We have our first game there, so we'll approach that then. But we're chucked in the deep end here really a little bit. Leinster's, I think they've been in 4 out of the last 5 finals or something. They've won a couple of them, been second a couple of other times. So, we got them first, and then Ulster second up, who have been, in the top 4 continuously, and then Ospreys. So, we've got 3 massive ones up. We've taken the approach, I want to see where we're at. I mean, we've obviously got individual goals, or not individual, but team goals within the they're more process goals rather than outcome goals. So, we want to, for example, win 90% of our set plays. We want to have a positive approach. So we got measures for that. We want to have a big one for the Italians as they give away too many penalties for me. So, we've got to have less than 10 penalties a game. So those are the ways we're going to measure our first 5 or 6 games it is, and then we'll have a real line in the sand and have some more probably outcome goals after that. But you've got to get your processes right, and that's been the thing I've been trying to hammer home with them, is that if we can get the processes right, well then the outcomes take care of themselves.
Yeah, the score takes care of itself for sure, and you miss those steps if you're all you're worried about at the 80-minute mark. What happens from 0 minutes to 79 minutes? Cool. Okay. All right. So when you're coaching specifically, what's a favourite part of your game? Part of the area of the game for you to coach?
Yeah, I like doing attack. I like looking at games and looking at areas that you can attack with. I think there's a big part for skills as well. I think lots of coaches have pretty fancy drills and all that sort of stuff, but you got to break your skill down. So those are a couple of things. But probably the main one for me is attack. I like that side of things.
Okay, well, we always end the show with the same final 4 questions. When you're growing up in New Zealand, or your time in New Zealand, who was one of your favourite players that really stood out to you?
Yeah, I don't know that I had a lot of favourite players. I mean, I used to watch them all. I used to admire, I was from a little club with only, a couple hundred people lived in the town. And so, the players, you used to play with in those clubs, you used to really admire them. They used to be hard workers and that sort of stuff. I suppose, from an international perspective, there's guys like, I always been a fullback. I always remember Serge Blanco. He used to attack the ball. Some days he'd be brilliant, some days he'd be bloody terrible, but it was just his approach to the game, I suppose. So, guys like that. There was a guy who used to play in the club I played in. He played a massive amount of games for the province, and he played a couple of games for the All Blacks. Guy Ian Allison, you would never have heard of, but players like that who just got on with it and just did the job, and they were good fun off the field too.
That's probably a general description of some French players there, the one you gave of Serge Blanco. They can do absolutely mind-blowing things, and then the next day it's like a different person.
Yeah, they're unpredictable. I mean, I used to find where as a fullback, when you played guys like, in New Zealand anyway, when you played guys like Grant Fox and that, who, you could always bank on what he was going to do, or where, if he went to kick the ball somewhere as a fullback, knew it was going to land where it was going to land. So it was a lot easier playing guys like that than it was playing against guys like Serge Blanco or players like that who were unpredictable.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, and what about now? Who are some of the favourite players you see running around in international and Super Rugby?
Yeah, I don't think I've got favourite players, but I mean, I really like, just watching games and just seeing how players play. I mean, I thought the English 10s, in the last series against Australia were outstanding, the way they controlled the game, etc. From an attack point of view, if you look at the way Beauden Barrett's playing at the moment, I think from an attack perspective, he's been outstanding.
It's unreal.
And then Yeah, and then you look at guys like, I enjoy, guys like, Brodie Retallick, for example, the Sam Kane, Richie McCaw when he was there, they just roll their sleeves up and, get into it and just, those sorts of players, I really respect what they bring to the game.
Yeah, and it's something quintessential about rugby too. It's like there's no fanfare. It's just get stuck in and do the job kind of thing.
Yeah, and the satisfaction you get out of doing a good job or something like that, I think is part of the big thing in rugby. It's you're not, the top players are not there for their own individual promotion. They're there, to do their job, and if they can do their job properly, and then the team has success, that's the pleasure they get out of it, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, on the coaches now, who's a high-profile coach that you like what they're doing and respect the processes they go through?
Oh, I think Wayne Smith's one that comes to mind for me. He's a great thinker of the game. Any discussions you have with him, he's great. And I think Dave Rennie for the Chiefs is another one for me. Just the way they manage people. The style that they like to play and that. So that'd be a couple of coaches that I think are pretty damn good.
Yeah, I agree. I think Wayne Smith, just how versatile he's become. I think he was the defence coach for the last World Cup. He was the attack coach for the World Cup before that, and he's probably done everything else in between. Probably coached some lineouts too if you gave it to him. Yeah. Okay, and last question: who's maybe someone with maybe not the profile of those guys, but a coach who you feel deserves a lot of recognition?
Oh, I think you've got a number of them. One coach that I had him with Canada, Neil Barnes, as Ford's coach. He went back. He was probably Neil would be the first one to admit that he wasn't politically correct when he was younger. He used to say what he thought and used to ruffle people's feathers, and so he probably didn't get a role in New Zealand. Then he was involved with me with Canada, and then you had the Super. He was offered Super 15 roles, and now he's with the Chiefs, and there's rumours that he could be going to Glasgow with Dave Rennie, and I know they're fighting to try and keep him in New Zealand. So he's probably a coach that never had the recognition he probably deserved earlier on, but is getting it now. But you get, I was involved in a couple of coaches in New Zealand at club level that I thought had outstanding rugby brains, but because they hadn't played at the top level, the people that made decisions didn't think that they were capable of coaching at the next level. And I think that's a fault that is big in world rugby, is that you get some people that don't get looked at for roles because they haven't played at the top level or they haven't, they don't kiss the right ass, that sort of thing. So. I can think of a guy back in New Zealand, Ra Marco, who, I thought he had an outstanding rugby brain. No one would have even heard of him. He was just a club coach, but, he never got positions because he didn't fit the profile, I suppose, of what they were wanting. And, I understand that in some way. But, and there's people in Canada, who are good rugby people who know the game and whatever, but get overlooked because they're not in the right place at the right time, I suppose, or they're not looked at as favourably as someone who has maybe just finished rugby but hasn't been through the trenches as a coach or something like that. And the other thing about coaching too is, you don't become a bad coach overnight. You don't. And you always improve in your coaching because you always have new experiences. But sometimes, for example, last year, they were saying Michael Cheika, was coach of the world, best coach in the world, and what he had done with the Wallabies and that. Well, he hasn't changed overnight to become a real bad coach now. So what, there's not always the coach's fault sort of thing that things don't go as they should go. The thing is, you see a lot of coaches turned over because of results, obviously, and yet the players still stay there, and that's sometimes I think players have to take a little bit more responsibility for what they are for performance, etc. at that top level.
Yeah, for sure. Couldn't agree with you more. All right, okay. Well, it's been great having a chat with you again, and really appreciate you coming on the show. And I'll be watching Benetton really closely, and all the best in the upcoming season. And it must be exciting. And I hope you guys give it a good crack.
Yeah, no, thanks very much, Andy. I enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to it. Don't know, in 6 months' time I might be, looking for something else too. You never know in this industry. You never know what's around the corner.
Yeah. Well, hopefully that's not the case, and all the best with the season.
Yeah, thanks very much.
All right, cheers, Kieran.
Cheers.
Cheers, mate.
Just can't let it go.
Thanks for listening to the Rugby Coaches Corner podcast.
What kind of world you want?
If you enjoyed the show, please leave a review via iTunes and keep listening for the next episode.
This disagreement.
You can also follow us on Twitter at RugbyCoachSCNR or via the website at therugbycoachescorner.com.
A stranger bit of fruit.
Until next time, keep sharing ideas to make the game better.